So this video is going to be covering cross-examination, and just a note, this video is really going to be one in a series of two, talking about how to cross-examine your opponent. This first video is really going to cover just kind of the basics, and I'm going to show you what it looks like. The next one is going to be talking about, how do you set up effective questions and how do you deal with difficult situations, like say if you were asked a question and you didn't know the answer. I will also be showing you a short example of what cross-examination looks like and kind of go through the debate again, just so you're clear on the format. So the goals of cross-examination, there's two different goals because you obviously have two different roles. So one, if you're asking the questions, it's to poke holes in your opponent's case. So looking for places that you can point out weaknesses, things that they said that you know are incorrect or you have information to counter. And of course, if you're answering questions, then bringing up new information or reiterating what you previously stated and basically working to add more to your case or defend your case. So what you want to ask yourself, do you have information to counter this? Is there a disadvantage to the plan they're proposing? Are they misrepresenting facts, or do you have something to counter it? Or is their logic flawed? So in that case, that is where you would ask a question. So the format of the debate. Just a reminder, pro goes first, 6 to 8 minutes. Con then cross-examines pro for 1 to 2 minutes. Keep in mind, only con will be asking the questions and only pro should be answering them. Then con does their speech and then pro. And just like I said before, cross-examination, in this particular point, only pro would be asking the questions and only con would be answering them. So this is an example of what the debate would look like. Notice right now we have one person speaking. That would be pro. Remember, 6 to 8 minutes for the speech. You saw a second ago her opponent sitting next to her taking notes. So that's what you want to do if you are the person who is not speaking. You want to be taking notes on what your opponent says so that you'll actually be able to come up with some questions. Like I said before, you can pre-prepare some of your questions, but I would really like it if you also came up with questions based on what your opponent said. So once she has finished speaking, this is pro still, remember the cross-examination is going to start. So you'll see in a second, once she finishes, her opponent is going to come up and start cross-examining her. Now, one thing to notice too here is when they do stand up to cross-examine each other, so notice here, Con is coming up, he will cross-examine her. Now, look, they are actually not going to be facing each other. This is a debate formality. He just actually started a timer because he's timing himself. Remember, you only have 2 minutes. That's not a lot of time. So once they finish their cross-examination, pro will sit down and then con will actually start his speech. All right, so now they've finished their cross-examination. So pro will sit down. She's now going to switch roles as far as taking notes, and then con will come up and start his speech. He then also has 6 to 8 minutes to defend his side of the position. So remember, he's arguing against the change. And then once his speech finishes, pro will then get a chance to cross-examine the opponent. So his speech is now wrapping up. Once he finishes, you will see her come up and we'll see cross-examination. Like I said before, when you cross-examine your opponent, you're actually not going to be looking at them. You will stand right by each other. So when your opponent is speaking, you sit down and take notes. And then once you actually come up, you will both be standing for cross-examination and you will face out to the audience. I know this seems really weird, but this is a debate format. This is the tradition. The reason being is because the argument is not about each other. It's not about your opponent. It's about proving to your audience that you have the best argument. And of course, it's not personal, so you don't need to actually look at them. So notice, not looking at each other, facing out to the audience. Once they finish, that would be the end of the debate. Now what you're going to see in a second is an example of a short segment of cross-examination. So the topic is actually going to be about roundabouts are better than traffic lights. This is coming from the Toronto Debate Society, excuse me. The speaker is going to be arguing for roundabouts, so he's going to be finishing his case, and then we'll see someone come up and cross-examine him, and they are arguing for traffic lights. Probably right now you're thinking, what the heck are roundabouts? They are these. So the person who is talking is going to be arguing that these are better than having traditional stoplights, right? The traffic lights that we typically have. So this is the debate example. I'm going to be starting it in a second. I've paused the video right now. The person you're looking at is actually the moderator of the debate. She's going to start by introducing the topic and talking a little bit about what people give points for as far as good cross-examination. And that's what you want to pay attention to. If she says prime minister, she means pro, or the person that's for the government or the change. Opposition, of course, means con. So just keep that in mind. Look for what the speakers are doing well and what they could improve on, because there are definitely some flaws in this particular example. And I'll also be putting some tips on, but you do want to pay attention to both what each can improve on for this particular segment. We're going to be watching the tail end of the speaker finishing his speech. It's the last minute, and then we'll see the cross-examination happen. That's the only segment that we'll be watching. Remember, there are 2 cross-examinations that actually do happen in the debate.
8 questions based upon this presentation that they just heard, based upon the topic of the debate, but to try to unnerve the speaker. It's a tactical format. It's not just simply asking simple questions. It's the whole goal of a cross-examination debate is to use time up and to take them off, to knock some wind out of their arguments. And it's a 2-minute opportunity. It can be very strenuous, it can be very challenging, it can be very, very exciting, and the adrenaline certainly rushes. But the idea is the debater sits down, listens, writes down some questions instead of interrupting the presentation, holds it all up until they come here. And the leader of the opposition has 2 minutes to sum up their arguments, and then the Prime Minister has 2 minutes to sum up their arguments. So the summation period is the same as in any regular debate. It's just the style and the minutes of the questioning. Points are awarded when the questions are based on debating content. So in this case, when Dave speaks for a couple of minutes and Jerry asks him some questions, Jerry must ask based upon Dave's content. So if that's done properly and that's done well, then Jerry would gain some points. Dave would win points if he handles the questions well. That is, he answers them with a bit of flair, finesse, perhaps fact, but very obviously knocks down the question. Can lose points if you come up and ask a question, you just ramble on in a monologue and there's no real question hidden in your comments. Or if when asked a question you become completely flustered and you do blah, 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 you lose points there. That's not good. So it's a really interesting experience. It takes some practice to get it done right, but it can be really fun in the end, especially when you win the debate, as was the case for the last cross-exam. That's kind of fun when you win the debate. Or fun when you don't win the debate. The bells ring all the way through. When you have the 2 minutes of questioning, I know the bells are ringing. There will be a double bell when that 2 minute is done, and that's when the debaters, the speakers, know to switch into their regular speech. And at the end of the 5 minutes, there's another bell, and they know to sit down. So the goal is to be precise, to be accurate, to focus in on what the speaker said. The benefit is you don't have to focus on what both members of the opposition said if you're asking from the government side, just the speaker who spoke before you. And with that, we're going to preview, we're going to show you an example of this style of debate on the motion. Be it resolved that roundabouts are better than traffic lights. The debate is already in progress. We're going to tune into the closing minute of the Prime Minister's speech.
Okay, so I realize I'm almost out of time, so I'll use my last minute to quickly cover my third and final point. As traffic circles do not require any type of illuminated signals, it will no longer be required to install them at all. This will save money on the cost and installation and repair, as well as the cost of the energy required to continuously illuminate these signals 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Further, these signals are susceptible to damage and power outages caused by storms or any other numbers of problems. Without these signals, we are free for the architecture of a roundabout to regulate itself for free. My honorable colleague will expand upon this and other of my key arguments. In summary, The government's three main points are: 1, that roundabouts offer 40% fewer vehicle collisions, 80% fewer injuries, and 90% fewer serious injuries and fatalities. 2, these superior designs are already installed in widespread use in major European cities. And 3, illuminated signals are not required. Please support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dave. To cross-examine the Prime Minister for 2 minutes, followed by 5 minutes of his own presentation, please welcome the Leader of the Opposition, Jerry.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Prime Minister, I have a few questions for you. Firstly, are you aware that your second point is a logical fallacy?
Well, actually...
Excuse me, wait, let me finish my statement here. As a logical fallacy is defined, you appealed to popularity or the fact that many people do something. In this case, many people use roundabouts. Just because many people use roundabouts, that does not make it a valid point, sir.
That actually seemed to be a bit more of a statement than a question, but I will say that you can call it whatever you like. However, it is the contention of the government that since these superior designs are already in widespread use in many major...
No, stop. As for your third point, you spoke about the cost saved by no longer being required to install traffic signals. Have you considered the immense cost involved in transforming the hundreds of thousands of traffic lights in Canada? How is your cost argument for cost benefits reasonable if you do not consider the refurbishment as part of the costs?
I would remind the Honourable Leader of the Opposition that tonight's resolution states that roundabouts are better than traffic lights, which means that it is not our burden to prove the fact that the implementation of traffic lights would be better. It is an inherent fact that the roundabouts themselves do not need to be powered. Therefore, they are better in this attribute.
Really? Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. I somewhat doubt your statements, but we'll get to that later. I shall now rebut some of your arguments, and then I will give you some of my own statements, none of which I have, so I'm not going any further.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. So I'd like to point out a couple of points. One is Jerry's long-winded questions. Long-winded questions. So if you consider that you have 2 minutes to ask questions when you're up here, if you can take up 1 minute and 30 in asking questions, that does not give Dave very much time. And in asking the questions, Jerry was actually proving his point. So he did have a couple of questions in one question, which is probably not the best way of doing it. But in his second point, have you considered the immense cost involved in transforming the hundreds of thousands of traffic lights? It puts the seed in the adjudicator's mind and into the mind of the audience is that, oh my goodness, we've got lots of traffic lights in Canada. How much is it going to cost to retrofit? How are roundabouts possibly better than that? Just puts that element of, oh, what if, or causes doubt, raises some doubt onto the Prime Minister's argument. So there were long-winded arguments, questions, but he also cut off the Prime Minister. He cut off Dave twice when Dave was trying to answer. So in doing that, that's another strategical tactic that you can use. Because if they're going to start to prove their point and not prove your point, you want to cut them off and move on to the next. It's not always fair, but nothing's fair in love and debating and war. And I do encourage you to give it a shot because it is a fun debating style. Now we can applaud. Thank you.
So that is it. So here are things that you need to answer. Name 2 things I or the moderator said the speakers should not do. Name 1 question the cross-examiner asked that you thought was effective. Have 3 to 4 arguments and claim data warrant for your practice debate. Now, some of you actually may already have this because, you had to do some of this in homework, and we also did this in the class. For the practice debate, I might have said 5 arguments is what you need. I misspoke on that, so it's just 3 to 4, but make sure that's 3 separate claims, separate data, separate warrants. And remember, for the practice debate, you do not have to research. I'm not requiring that. So if you want to come up with maybe sort of common sense points to prove the claim or hypotheticals or other research, if you do want to research, you're more than welcome to, but I'm not requiring it. Come up with 2 questions to ask your opponent for the practice debate. So I know I'm just basically introducing this, but see if you can kind of practice this. Look at what was talked about. You're obviously going to have to determine what your opponent's going to be saying, and that's where those 4 questions come in, right? You want to look at both sides of the argument. And then the last thing, bring in 2 sources for your formal debate topic. We are going to start moving on to that. And we do want to start working on the research and the outline, which I'll talk about in the next video. All right, that's it.